From 1878 to 1968, there were 71 lake captains that called Bayview, Wisconsin, on the shore of Lake Michigan, their home. While they lived here, they captained 195 different ships, from tugboats to schooners to steamships, in voyages that took them to every one of the Great Lakes. Join us now for another episode of Bayview, Town of Lake Captains, where we explore not only these captains, but also their ships, their homes, their families, and their lifetime of sailing adventures on the Great Lakes.
Well, hi everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Bayview, Town of Lake Captains, where we talk about the 71 different lake captains that once lived in Bayview from 1878 to 1968 in the age of sail and steam. This episode is sponsored by, like all the others, the Historic Bayview Lake Captains Society. Now today I'm standing in front of the former home of Captain William Lawrie, who was a tremendous lake captain. Tremendous. He had a great knack for entrepreneurialism. When you think about it, most of the Bayview Lake Captains' homes, or most of the Bayview Lake Captains, were entrepreneurs because back in those days, most of the two-masted schooners anyway were captain owned or family owned, and so that they ran it as a business, so they were entrepreneurs in that regard. But William Lawrie was way beyond that. He had the idea before automobiles of establishing an excursion service between South Shore Park and Juneau Park on the lake. I think it was like 25 cents for round trip. I can't remember. It's coming up in the video. He's the only Bayview Lake captain to be born and raised and spend his whole life in this one house. As you know from other episodes, the Bayview Lake captains moved around a lot, but not William Lawrie. He was born here, raised here, spent his whole life here. Besides being a professional lake captain, he was also an amateur lake captain and an amateur racing champion. He won many races, Chicago to Mackinac Island race, among others. Champion. Really something special. And when he was running his excursion business, when late September or something, when the weather turned, he would charter the boat out, and he actually helped someone that needed a job, and he gave them an opportunity, chose them to become trained as an engineer on one of his ships. Had a tragic outcome, but William Lawrie reached out to help this man and his family, and that's the kind of guy that William Lawrie was. He was a tremendous asset to Bayview, both in the maritime sense and in the personal sense. So lots more to him, and it's all coming up in the episode here, and I know you're going to enjoy it because he was great. With that, I'll sign off and say hats off to Bayview's Lake Captains. I'll see you next time. So long, bye-bye.
Welcome to another installment of Bayview, Town of Lake Captains, where we discuss the lives of the 71 different lake captains that once lived in Bayview, Wisconsin, during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, in the age of sail and steam. This discussion will include their ships, their homes, their families, and their lifetime of sailing adventures on the Great Lakes. Here is the map of lake captains' homes in Bayview to show you where this episode takes place. Its location focuses primarily on the large green arrow. Today we will be discussing the life of Captain William J. Lawrie, Jr., of 2602 South Shore Drive, who used his substantial entrepreneurial talent to create his own sailing excursion line in Bayview. Many Bayview lake captains that owned and captained their own ships were, by this very fact, entrepreneurial, and one of them even started his own Jitney bus company on the side. But none of these other captains were as gifted as William Lawrie when it came to creating, building, and managing successful businesses. The only Bayview lake captain to be born, grow up, and spend his entire life in the same Bayview home, at 2602 South Shore Drive. He was both an award-winning amateur sailing yacht captain as well as a professional lake captain. His father and extended family were also avid sailors, and contributed mightily to Bayview's spectacular maritime history. When his successful sailing excursion business was passed over by time, Captain Lawrie once again demonstrated his great business mind by beginning and running a highly successful non-maritime business. He had a great track record of overcoming adversity, and also of extending a helping hand to those that needed it. Captain William J. Lawrie was born in September 1895 in Bayview. He is the only Bayview lake captain that is confirmed to have been born in Bayview. He also spent his entire life in Bayview, in the same house. His father, William Sr., was born in July 1863 in Scotland, and immigrated to the USA in 1887, settling immediately in Milwaukee. In 1890, William Sr. married wife Elizabeth, and they had 4 children, 2 of which died before 1900. The 2 surviving children were boys William J. and a brother, Archibald Archie T. Lawrie. In 1893, William Sr. moved with Elizabeth to Bay Street in Bayview in 1893, working as a, quote, moulder, unquote. Then, the following year of 1894, the family moved to what would be their final Bayview home, and also son William Jr.'s home for the rest of their lives, 2602 South Shore Drive. From his earliest days, William Jr. was exposed to sailing. His uncle, James Barr, took him out sailing for the first time at age 7. And it was in the house he grew up in, and lived until he died in, at 2602 South Shore Drive in Bayview, in which the South Shore Yacht Club was organized by his grandfather, William Pop Barr, in 1913. His father, William Sr., would also have an influence on him becoming interested in things nautical. In 1912, William Sr. was hired as the first ever superintendent of South Shore Bathing Beach. At the time he was hired, South Shore Park hadn't even been designed yet. Under his tenure, he saw South Shore Beach grow in attendance from a few hundred to several thousand each day, and become one of the most popular sites for recreation in Milwaukee. This is proven in 1922, when records show South Shore Beach had 1,959 people attend on a Sunday in mid-July, while only half, 1,111, went to McKinley Beach. Equally interesting is that baptism was a popular feature at South Shore Beach during this period. William Sr. also saved at least 5 lives while he was the superintendent of South Shore Beach. The first one was in 1916, when a 10-year-old boy was rescued by the beach's lifesaver on duty. When the boy reached the shore, Mr. Lawrie helped administer mouth-to-mouth resuscitation until the boy recovered. The next 4 occurred in 1923, when 4 17-year-old boys, 3 from Bayview, ended up in the water offshore when their rowboat capsized in rough seas. Seeing what was happening, the elder Lawrie ran to the beach's rowboat and rowed out to the boys, pulling them out of the cold water as they began to get tired, undoubtedly saving their lives. Between his father's, uncle's, and grandfather's active involvement with the lake, it was natural that William J. Lawrie, Jr. would become both a professional lake captain, as well as one of Milwaukee's and Bayview's greatest amateur yacht racing sailors. As mentioned earlier, he is the only Bayview lake captain that was born, grew up in, sailed from, retired in, and died in Bayview, all in the same house. However, early records about him are limited. The only records that could be found of his years growing up in Bayview are that he graduated from South Division High School in about 1913. This made him the only one of Bayview's 71 lake captains to have received a high school diploma, the rest of them averaging just a 7th-grade education. What he did after high school is unknown, as the first time additional documentation appears on him is 9 years later, when he was elected Vice Commodore of the South Shore Yacht Club in 1922. This certainly proves, however, that while it isn't known what he was doing for a working career, he undoubtedly from his youngest days had been active and growing as an amateur sailor, mostly operating out of the South Shore Yacht Club. In 1925 or 1926, William Lawrie decided to form a unique and special company for and in Bayview, the Lawrie Transit Company. His idea? Create a summer-long excursion business that would sail sightseers back and forth across Milwaukee Bay, between Bayview's South Shore Park and Juneau Park on Milwaukee's Upper East Side. He ran the business out of his Bayview home at 2602 South Shore Drive for nearly 10 years, 1926 to 1935, using 5 different boats over that time, sometimes operating together: the Lois Pearl, North Shore 2, South Shore, and Mayflower Junior. They used piers that Lawrie had to construct with his own money at South Shore and Juneau Parks to board and debark passengers. Before and after each summer, in the off-season, he would put the boats to use hauling cargo, like fruit and Christmas trees, up and down Wisconsin's Lake Michigan coast, as well as back and forth between Milwaukee and coastal towns in Michigan. The Lois Pearl was Lawrie's first excursion boat, bought by his newly founded Lawrie Transit Company, and was the first used on the Bayview to Juneau Park excursion route he invented, beginning operations in the spring of 1926. It was originally built in 1905 as the 70-foot schooner Mistral that won the 1907 Chicago to Mackinac Island yacht race. At some point afterwards, date unknown, probably another owner, though it could also have been Lawrie, converted the Lois Pearl over to carry cargo on 2 decks, making it perfect for excursion use. It's unclear when Lawrie bought it, but on 1st December 1925, the Lois Pearl had run aground on its way to Fayette, Michigan, from Milwaukee to pick a cargo of Christmas trees. If Lawrie had just bought it, and thus owned it when it was carrying these Christmas trees, in preparation for kicking off his new lake excursion business in 1926, he used all of his excursion vessels in the off-season to haul cargo, including Christmas trees, on his later excursion boat, North Shore 2. Then this would make the Lois Pearl the 3rd Christmas tree ship operating out of Bayview. However, Lawrie's exact purchase date of the Lois Pearl is unknown. The other 2 Bayview Christmas tree ships were the 3-masted schooner Vermont, owned and captained by Bayview Lake Captain Hans J. Hansen, and later by Bayview Lake Captains Charles and Rudolph Morbeck, and William Lawrie's North Shore 2. Charles Morbeck also owned and captained the schooner Southside, that functioned as a Christmas tree ship, but that was before he moved to Bayview. The Lois Pearl operated on the South Shore Park to Juneau Park route from 1926 to 1931, the trips taking 30 minutes each way, for a fee of 25 cents round trip, children 15 cents, at a passenger capacity of 110 on 2 decks. Weekdays also saw the hosting of special trips for hire for large groups, and was even used as a scientific research vessel by officials testing Milwaukee's water quality. William Lawrie is confirmed as its captain in several news reports, including in the off-season when used as a cargo freighter, though often he would contract the ship and its crew out to others. This reporting confirms him as a Bayview Lake captain, and he undoubtedly captained his other ships at various times. Right from the start, William Lawrie's idea of an excursion business proved profitable, and by the end of the 2nd sailing season, 1927, things were going so well, both demand and profitability was high, that he bought another vessel and renamed it the South Shore to begin running excursions in 1928, simultaneously with the Lois Pearl. Then, in 1930, he even built another one, this time brand new, the North Shore. Launched at the Becker Street Bridge, spanning the Kinnickinnic River, Lawrie built it as, quote, the first all-electrically welded passenger boat to be built on the Great Lakes, and the second of its kind in the United States, unquote. His wife Meta christened it, and 400 people attended the launch. Thus, in the summer of 1930, he had 3 boats on the excursion route, Lois Pearl, South Shore, North Shore, each double-deckers, carrying on average around 150 passengers. These were big times for William Lawrie. But just 3 months later, on 27 September 1930, the brand-new North Shore sank in a storm on Lake Michigan, with the loss of 6 lives. The North Shore had finished its excursions for the summer, And like any prudent businessman, William Lawrie didn't just let his substantial capital investment, his ships, sit idle. He leased them out, mostly, though not always, captained and crewed by others. This was the case with the loss of the North Shore out on the lake. Lawrie had contracted out the little 65-foot ship to carry fruit, in this case grapes, from Michigan to Milwaukee. The captain was just 25, and his new bride of only a month, age 18, was aboard with him, along with a crew of 4. All 6 perished. They weren't the only ones either, because that storm also caused the loss of 2 other ships and 5 more lives. 2 important Bayview Lake captains and Bayview's most prolific shipowner were involved in this story. First, one of those other ships lost, with all the crew rescued off Sheboygan, Wisconsin, was the schooner Our Sun, that was owned by Bayview lumber baron Winan Schlosser, Bayview's most prolific shipowner. There's a chapter about Mr. Schlosser in our book, Bayview, Town of Lake Captains, for sale now on both Amazon.com and HenschelHouseBooks.com, as well as a video on this channel. Link in the description box if you've not yet seen it. Second, fellow Bayview Lake Captain and U.S. Coast Guard Captain William Preston, the greatest lifesaver in recorded U.S. life-saving service and U.S. Coast Guard history, helped in the search when the North Shore first went missing. Preston, who amazingly lived on Bayview's Bay Street at the time, while commanding the Grand Haven, Michigan, U.S. Coast Guard Station. That's right, he lived in Bayview while running and commanding the U.S. Coast Guard Station on the other side of Lake Michigan, sailed out of Grand Haven into the teeth of the storm, in one of the Coast Guard's small open boats, with a crew of 4, to look for and try to rescue the people on the missing North Shore. Captain Preston's lifetime of heroics and complete biography appeared in his own dedicated chapter in our book, Bayview, Town of Lake Captains, for sale now on both Amazon.com and HenschelHouseBooks.com, and there is a video scheduled for him in the near future, so be sure to look for it on this channel. And third, William Lawrie, owner of the missing North Shore, chartered a seaplane from Kohler Aviation Company, which had a base in Milwaukee, though no connection to the current Kohler Manufacturing Company and family, to conduct his own search from the air. Lawrie saw nothing. Kohler even proceeded further beyond Lawrie's charter of one of their planes by ceasing passenger flights between Milwaukee and Muskegon, so that all 6 of its fleet of planes could be dedicated to the search, to no avail. In the end, only Preston made any discovery in the search, finding just pieces from the little North Shore. During this search process, however, he and his men heroically rescued 2 sailors from one of the other vessels that sank that night from the water and massive waves, during 40-mile-an-hour winds that had lashed themselves to floating wreckage. Incredibly, Preston just happened upon them during his North Shore search. These 2 men rescued, Preston could have returned to his base at Grand Haven, but not William Preston. No, he sailed on through the storm to Milwaukee in an open boat, where he brought the pieces of North Shore's wreckage to be identified personally by William Lawrie. 2 Bayview neighbours and fellow lake captains, Preston and Lawrie, working together. Truly amazing. Over the winter of 1930 to 31, William Lawrie decided to build a replacement for the loss of the North Shore. This culminated in the launching of its replacement on 26th June 1931. He named it North Shore, though for the purpose of this video it will be called North Shore 2, so that it will not be confused with its predecessor of the same name. Lawrie's design replaced North Shore 1's novel steel hull with a wooden one, and it was built to carry 250 excursion passengers. The North Shore 2 was constructed in Manitowoc, and Lawrie's 7-year-old daughter, Lois, christened it. This allowed Lawrie to resume excursion service between Bayview, South Shore Park, and Juneau Park with 3 ships, the Lois Pearl, South Shore, and now the North Shore too, as he had been doing the year before, 1930. After the excursion season of 1931 concluded, Lawrie leased the North Shore too, just as he had done with the North Shore, as well as his other excursion ships. In late November 1931, the still new North Shore 2 returned to Milwaukee with 6,500 Christmas trees from Fayette, Michigan. This made it the second, and possibly the third, if the Lois Pearl, as mentioned above, could be found to be owned by Lawrie before starting excursion service, Bayview Christmas tree ship. The first had been the 3-masted schooner Vermont, owned by Bayview Lake Captain Hans Hansen, and crewed by future Bayview Lake Captains Charles and Rudolph Morbeck, brothers. All 3 have a chapter dedicated to them in the book Bayview, Town of Lake Captains, as well as dedicated videos on this channel. See the links in the description box if you'd like to see them. In early 1932, William Lawrie became aware of the plight of an impoverished family and its unemployed father of 4 young children, Lawrence Alstrom. Living in an abandoned fishing shack just north of the Kinnickinnic River, the impoverished Alstrom family had just about given up hope when William Lawrie stepped in to help. Lawrie not only hired Lawrence, who had no marketable skills, he also trained him to be an engineer on Lawrie's excursion vessel South Shore, where he could remain gainfully employed and also have a chance at a career and move on and up into larger ships in the future. Nobody asked Lawrie to do this. He just went ahead and made it happen on his own. Captain William Lawrie, a real man and a real hero. After the excursion season of 1932, summer, had concluded, Lawrie began, as usual, to contract his ships out over the fall in order to generate some revenue, instead of just sitting tied up to the pier. Usually, when contracting the ship out, others provided their own crews. But Lawrie reached out to Lawrence Alstrom in late October, hiring him and training him to be the ship's engineer. Lawrie was making sure Alstrom's employment continued on as long as possible that fall. What happened next can only be called a colossal and heartbreaking tragedy. The South Shore foundered in a huge gale on Lake Michigan the week before Thanksgiving, 1932, with the loss of all hands, including Lawrence Alstrom. It had departed Garden, Michigan, in Big Bay-de-Noc, northeast of Green Bay, for Milwaukee with 30 tons of potatoes on about 19th November. After a week, it was declared missing. It was a horrible loss. Still, it shouldn't be forgotten that William Lawrie had stepped up when he didn't have to in order to help someone less fortunate than himself. Bayview should be extremely proud it has someone like William Lawrie in its history. There are also 2 other heroes in this story. First were the people that owned the fishing shack that let the Alstrom family use it when they had nowhere else to go. And Lawrence Alstrom himself, for taking on Mrs. Alstrom's 2 children from her previous marriage. When it comes to helping others, courage and heroics come in all sorts of colours and patterns. What became of Mrs. Alstrom and her 4 children, the family that William Lawrie had tried to help? It's unknown, but perhaps a future Bayview history researcher can take a look. The loss of the South Shore was the second ship that William Lawrie had lost in the past 2 years, the other being the original North Shore in 1930. But Lawrie wasn't one to quit. Far from it. Still, it did seem like even earlier that year, his years of good fortune were beginning to take a turn for the worse. Earlier in that same year, before the South Shore was lost, during the excursion sailing season of 1932, competition showed up at William Lawrie's doorstep. A company named Summers Brothers Boat Company had gotten the Milwaukee City Council to approve its request to use the dock at South Shore Park to start a competitive line with Lawrie on the South Shore Park to Juneau Park excursion route. This touched off outrage at the County Park Board at the City Council's action, since it, the County Parks system, believed the city had no authority to control access to county parks and its related activities. Besides, the county had already signed, years ago, in June 1928, a contract with Lawrie giving him exclusive rights to the excursion route and the docks at both parks for 5 years, that wasn't due to expire until May of 1933, the upcoming year. That contract had provided not only that Lawrie would provide the county with 10% of his gross receipts, but it also required him to build, with his own money, at least the dock at Juneau Park, but likely also the one at South Shore Park, to facilitate the service. If and when the contract was ended, the county parks system would then take custody of the docks Lawrie built and paid for. Now the city had stepped in, out of nowhere, and given a competitor access to the route, using the same docks Lawrie had built and paid for himself, in accordance with the exclusive contract he had with the county. Outrageous! It was during this period of time, in the fall of 1932, as the two governmental bodies were fighting it out over who controlled the offshore excursion business, that the South Shore sank. Now Lawrie was short one excursion boat again, as he had been in 1930 when the North Shore sank. With the possibility of a competitive line starting up in the upcoming spring 1933, Lawrie had to find himself another excursion boat to replace the South Shore, and he had to find one fast. By almost divine intervention he found one. A family estate in Oshkosh, by perfect coincidence and timing, had just put up for sale a 2-deck excursion boat that had been sailing tourists across and around Lake Winnebago, and it had a stern paddle wheel. Lawrie worked hard to get it ready for the summer business, and by early June 1933 it was up and operating. This was no small feat, and he even kept the name, Mayflower Junior. It was to be Milwaukee's one and only stern paddle wheel excursion boat, and William Lawrie hired neighbour and fellow Bayview Lake captain John A. Doak to captain it the first 2 sailing seasons, 1933 to 34. There's a chapter on Captain Doak in the book Bayview, Town of Lake Captains, for sale now on both Amazon.com and HenschelHouseBooks.com, and a future video scheduled for him in the near future, so be sure to look out for it on this channel. At the exact time William Lawrie got the Mayflower Junior into the water and running on the excursion route, the county caved in and prematurely ended his 5-year contract that had given him exclusive rights to the South Shore Park to Juneau Park Summer Lake excursion business. The county then seized the docks he had built with his own money, as he had been instructed to do in the original 1928 contract, and then, to add insult to injury, allowed his new competitor, Summers Brothers Boat Company, to use these docks for free. The county did provide one minor concession to Lawrie. Instead of kicking back 10% to the county for exclusivity, Lawrie and Summers had to both pay the county 5% each, for the privilege of accessing the 2 parks. Captain Lawrie tried to make a go of it during the 1933 season, but the formerly lucrative parks excursion business was to prove no longer financially viable. Slowly but surely, the Lawrie Transit Company began to falter. By 1935, just 2 years and sailing seasons later, it would be all over. Surprisingly, though, while the competition was a contributing factor that ended it, this wasn't the main factor. That turned out to be simply the passage of time shown by society choosing the automobile and building new roads to go with it. Even if Lawrie had retained exclusivity, the days of lake-borne excursions to and from South Shore and Juneau Parks were numbered. The continued growth in automobiles, accompanied by expanding road networks and infrastructure, ended the whole concept of excursions by lake. Why pay to go by boat when you can go in your own automobile, for free, in less than half the time? With the Interpark Lake excursion business now gone, William Lawrie had to adapt. He decided to turn his beloved Lois Pearl into a floating fish market over the winter of 1933 to 34. Unfortunately, it was to sink in late April 1934 at the northeast corner of Kilbourne Avenue Bridge, after it was damaged by a passing river scow. William Lawrie wasn't able to raise it for over a year, finally bringing it up in mid-June 1935. Undeterred, he formed a new company named Inland Lake Cruises, Inc., for a new form of lake excursions, Saturday night cruises on Milwaukee Bay. The cruise would leave the foot of Lincoln Memorial Bridge at 11 p.m. and return at 1 a.m., using the North Shore 2 and the Mayflower Junior. It was after this new business line of Saturday night Milwaukee Bay cruises began that the second part of the second round of double disasters hit. The first round of double disasters had been the previous losses of both the North Shore and South Shore within 2 years of each other. The second round of double disasters began with the previously mentioned sinking of the now fish market Lois Pearl at the Kilbourne Avenue Bridge in late April 1934. This was then followed by the tragic sinking of the Mayflower Junior at the South Shore Park Pier that Lawrie had built and paid for himself back in 1928, just 6 months later, on 15th September 1934. Here's what happened. The Mayflower Junior had been tied up to the South Shore Park dock, but then a freak situation occurred. As the lake level rose, the Mayflower Junior's rail got snagged under the outer edge of the dock, tilting the little ship and letting water flow in. Though the water by the dock was only about 7 feet deep, it still got into the hold, and especially the engine room. The repair costs were enormous. It was a death blow to the Mayflower Junior, and with the company already struggling, there is no information indicating it ever sailed again. Then, as if things couldn't get any worse, a week later, on 22nd September 1934, the North Shore 2 had to be rescued by the U.S. Coast Guard 8 miles out on the lake from Milwaukee when its engine quit. It was bringing in a load of fruit to Milwaukee. Things were not looking good for Captain Lawrie. The end result was that the 2 sinkings of the Lois Pearl and the Mayflower Junior at the end of the 1934 sailing season ended the Lawrie Transit Company and Inland Lake Cruises, Inc. That summer, 1934, would be the last summer the company would carry passengers. Of the 3 excursion boats William Lawrie had operated continuously since 1928, only one was left now, and that had engine problems. It was over. With the Lois Pearl, North Shore, South Shore, and Mayflower now all sunk, William Lawrie was left now with just one, the North Shore 2. But what to do with it? The answer would come from his connections within the Lake Michigan commerce community. He would turn it into a full-time freighter, operating under a new company. Over the winter of 1934 to 35, Lawrie, in partnership with others, formed the West Shore Steamship Company. The North Shore 2 was to be its only ship, with another to be added later. The sailing freight route would be from Milwaukee, leaving at 5 a.m., to Sheboygan to Manitowoc and back. William Lawrie was to be the company's general manager, though not its president, and not the North Shore 2's captain, with his office in Milwaukee, most certainly his house in Bayview, at 2602 South Shore Drive. The company's main headquarters would be in Sheboygan, as that is where the majority financial investment was centered. Branch offices would be in Manitowoc and Chicago. Operations would begin on 1st July 1935. Bizarrely, as if the new company knew the future of freight was already transitioning away from ships and over to an expanding truck and rail infrastructure, the company announced that freight would be, quote, trucked in, unquote, to and from Two Rivers and Chicago, and that, quote, the company will have a pickup and delivery service at all points using its own trucks, unquote. It's true that road, highway, and rail infrastructure was still not fully complete and viable, allowing via lake freighting to still exist. But this acknowledgement showed the company was doomed from the start, and when roads were complete, which was happening fast, its days would be over. Sure enough, the West Shore Steamship Company likely ceased operations at the end of that sailing season, 1935. The exact date isn't known, but the North Shore II was then sold in 1935 to a possible brother of its captain, the brother residing in Marinette, Wisconsin. The North Shore II appears to have then been used once again, and for the purpose William Lawrie designed and built it, as a summer excursion vessel, this time for tourists going to and from Washington Island, in Upper Door County, about 50 miles northwest of Marinette, and guarding the entrance to Green Bay from Lake Michigan. That next 1936 summer excursion business lasted with this new owner for 5 years, through 1940, then probably operated successfully by a series of different owners until 1950, when the North Shore II was sold again. This time it was purchased by the Beaver Island Transit Company, most certainly to ferry summer tourists to and from Beaver Island, which is on Lake Michigan, just off the coast of northwest Michigan's Lower Peninsula, near Traverse City. That business lasted at least 6 years. Once again, William Lawrie's design proved successful, doing what it was intended and built to do, transport summer tourists and excursionists. The North Shore II probably remained there, going through a few more owners, until it finally ceased operations, its last recorded year being 1960. The last of William Lawrie's excursion ships was gone. After the West Shore Steamship Company's probable closure, after just one sailing season in late 1935, and with the Lawrie Transit Company also out of business, William Lawrie decided to go in a different direction. He left the maritime profession to create his own manufacturing company. In 1939, he partnered with his son, William T. Lawrie, to start a new company, this time called Ready Products Company, a metals finishing firm, and later named Coated Abrasives, Inc., 211 South 2nd Street in Walker's Point. The company flourished for the next 21 years, when William J. retired as its president and board chairman and sold his financial interest in the firm. The success of this company, after decades in the maritime profession, shows what a skilled entrepreneur William Lawrie was. His back to the wall in the maritime business, where he had been enormously successful for many years, he was able to pivot and move in a completely different direction, and he succeeded fabulously. To do that, he had to have had great entrepreneurial skills and a superb mind for business. Not many people, then or today, could do that. During all of the above activities of Captain William J. Lawrie in the maritime profession, throughout it all, he was also a very active yachtsman. It was clear the lake was his passion, and he showed it repeatedly in both earning a living from it and also from pleasure sailing on it for decades. But it was right after he was out of the professional side of things maritime in 1935 that he accelerated his amateur yachting activities and immediately came into his own. The very next year, 1936, he won the Chicago to Mackinac Island race in his sailing yacht, Hope. Perhaps most significantly, he won the race, even though at one point he ran aground on Graham Shoals, only a few miles west of the island, but recovered to win. In 1937, he was the only Milwaukeean, the other 5 were all from Chicago, to be selected as the best Lake Michigan yachtsman and to compete for the Bartell Trophy in Toronto, Canada. Competitive teams were chosen from the best of each of the Great Lakes. Lawrie's team won the race and the trophy. Later, on 17th August 1940, he was named captain of the Lake Michigan Yachting Association's crew that was to race again for the Bartell Trophy. The next year, July 1938, he won the Morse Trophy for his victory in the Chicago to Milwaukee race, both the Universal Class and Racing Division. By this time, he had been sailing pleasure and racing sailing yachts for 33 years, since age 7, owned 6 different sailing racing yachts, all moored at one time or another at the private dock behind his Bayview home at 2602 South Shore Drive, and was even building inland scow-type sailboats, 10 feet long by 4 feet wide, in his basement. In 1943, lightning struck twice for William Lawrie, as he won the Chicago to Mackinac Island race for the second time, this time in the cruising division, aboard his yacht Lassie, that he co-owned with his son William T. It was the first time ever that a sailing yacht from Milwaukee had won the race. Over the years he had also crewed, quote, a number of boats in various Mackinac races, unquote. Actually, it was the third time lightning struck. The first time was when literally a lightning bolt shattered Lawrie's flagpole at 2602 South Shore Drive in 1929, shaking the entire house, sending smoke into its rooms, and sending splinters a half-block away. William Lawrie and his yacht Lassie also went on to win the 1945 annual regatta at Bayview's South Shore Yacht Club. Just a month later, Lassie was damaged in a storm that actually threw it up onto the beach. Lawrie sold it in 1948. Finally, when the Netherlands cargo ship Prins Wilhelm V sank off Milwaukee on 14th October 1954, 2 of its lifeboats were recovered and put up for sale. William Lawrie bought one of them and promptly converted it in his backyard into a pleasure cruiser, complete with outboard motor, and began sailing it. He named it the Sandy and home-ported it in the summer at Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. The amazing William Lawrie. Besides being at one time Milwaukee's best amateur sailor, he was also very active in a leadership capacity at Bayview's South Shore Yacht Club, SSYC. A charter member, he served on the 1934 building committee that built the present SSYC building, as it stands today, the first one built on the shore for the organization. It replaced the previous structure that had been built on an offshore barge that was destroyed in a storm in 1929. On 27th November 1943, he was elected Commodore, President of the SSYC, and also elected as a delegate to the Lake Michigan Yachting Association's Sail Yacht Squadron. At the end of his one-year term as SSYC's Commodore, Lawrie continued serving on its board of directors. One of the most interesting things he was connected with was getting yachting's Queen's Cup to the SSYC. Quote, Mr. Lawrie was trustee of the Queen's Cup, a trophy won off Cowes, England, in 1853 by an American yacht. The trophy later was deeded to the SSYC by one of its members, Walter C. Hull, at Lawrie's urging. The late Mr. Hull lived at the Lawrie home. It is today one of the oldest trophies in the world of yachting that is still awarded for competition every year. Unquote. It really isn't surprising that, in addition to his many other achievements, William Lawrie would also have been a leader in Bayview. He is documented to have been involved in the following Bayview events and activities. 1935 Treasurer and 1936 Planning and Committee Member of the South Shore Frolic, aka SSYC's High Jinks, and the 1935 Citizens Committee for the Milwaukee Coast Guard Station's 145th birthday party. He was also involved in other activities and organizations: the Lake Masonic Lodge, No. 189, Tripoli Temple; the Lake Shore, Kenosha, and Racine Shrine Clubs; and the Wisconsin Consistory. William Lawrie was a busy man. Note that the Shrine Clubs were known for raising money to help crippled children, and when William died, his family asked that donations be made to the shrine hospitals for crippled children through the Tripoli Temple. He and wife Meta had 2 children, one son, William T., and one daughter, Lois. Lois, later in life, became very much active in Bayview and Milwaukee historical causes, especially maritime-related. She carried on the legacy of her father and the Lawrie family literally for decades. Captain William J. Lawrie died on 9th August 1961. He is buried with wife Meta and son William T. at Forest Home Cemetery. His obituary, documenting his maritime exploits, was nearly half a page in both Milwaukee newspapers, a large amount of coverage even in those days. Over the years he appeared often, including one feature article in the Milwaukee newspapers, which documented his achievements on the lakes. He is the only Bayview lake captain to have been born and raised in Bayview. He even spent his entire life living in the same house in Bayview, too, making him the longest tenured lake captain for a single Bayview home. Each Bayview lake captain was and is different, but what distinguished William Lawrie was the masterful job he did of combining his passion and great skill for sailing with a superb entrepreneurial ability that allowed him to create a wonderful piece of Bayview maritime history: lake excursions between South Shore and Juneau Parks. Thanks for watching. This photograph isn't about Bayview or its lake captains, but it's from the same era of Great Lakes maritime history. We thought we'd close with it for enjoyment, as it captures the spirit of the era. If you'd like to read more details about Captain William J. Lawrie, Jr., as well as the sources for the information contained in today's video, you can find these and more in the book Bayview, Town of Lake Captains, for sale now, by individual volumes in both e-book and paperback, on both Amazon.com and HenschelHouseBooks.com. All proceeds from book sales go to support various maritime history projects related to Bayview's lake captains. One of these is a plaque and marker with the captains' names and addresses on it, as part of the creation of the Bayview Lake Captains Historic District, which will be the first of its kind in America. If you would like to contribute to support these projects, to include this and other markers honouring Bayview's lake captains, with 100% of all donations and contributions in all forms going to support them, please consider contributing to us through the listings found on our website under the Contribute button, as well as in the end credits at the conclusion of this video. Note, we are not a 501c3, so contributions are not tax-deductible. If, for some reason, we are unable to secure these markers, then all funds donated to this site will be given as a cash donation to the museum ship SS City of Milwaukee in Manistee, Michigan. This is the only surviving intact ship that was once captained by a Bayview lake captain, and in its case was captained by at least 2, and likely 3, totaling over 20 years between them. Finally, we also have free self-guided walking tours of Bayview's 71 lake captains' homes, using only your phone. It's simple and easy. Just go to our website shown here, find the item on the menu bar at the upper left named Free Self-Guided Walking Tours, and then scroll down to find the map with the instructions. Zoom in by street. When you find a captain's house you're interested in, Click on it, and details appear on the right, along with a link to the YouTube episode from this channel that provides the biography of the captain that lived there. It's free, fun, and available any time you are out walking. Just bring along your phone. I'm Simon Stanhope, narrator for these episodes. Join us again soon for the next chapter of Bayview, Town of Lake Captains.